Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Hiring for Engageability, presented by Engage2Excel. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that this webinar has been pre-approved for IHR certification credits, one HRCI webcast recertification credit, and one HRCI e-learning credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast to receive your credits. If you're joining us live today, you'll receive an email from HR.com within 1 to 2 business days that will include your certification credit information. You can also log into HR.com and go to your My Certifications page where you can see the credits you've received and also find out about our recertification program and e-learning webcast pass. If you have any questions today for our presenters or for HR.com, please type them into the Questions tab on your GoToWebinar control panel and we'll be sure to follow up with you. And it's my pleasure now to turn you over to Engage2Excel.
Great, thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webcast. I am Jeff Gelinas, and I'm the Vice President of People and Product at Engage2Excel. I've spent the last several years in product management, but my prior life resides in HR management and staffing. Before joining Engage2Excel, I worked for IBM Connexa, where I held various HR leadership and staffing roles. I'm really excited to be with you here today to discuss an important topic, hiring for Engageability. In just a few moments, I'll introduce Darren Finley, who is our main speaker today, and tell you a little bit more about what we have in store. So we have a great agenda planned for you today. First, we're going to talk about engagement, which is so top of mind for company leaders today. Next, we're going to talk about why engagement needs to be part of your talent acquisition strategy. Then we're going to move into the how you can build a pipeline of highly engaged candidates, and then we'll end with some key takeaways. We're also joined by Tyler Morrison and Aaron Grossman from Engage2Excel, who are going to help us look at the questions coming in. And as we go throughout the presentation today, please feel free to ask a question. We'll get up to as many questions as we can. And if we can't get to everybody, we'll get back to you within 24 to 36 hours. As a final note, I wanted to let everyone know that you will have access to the slides from today's presentation. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Darren Finley. Darren is a veteran in the recruitment industry and brings over 32 years of recruiting and staffing solutions experience to Engage2Excel. At Engage2Excel, he leads our recruitment solutions team. Prior to joining Engage2Excel, he was at AMN, where he led a team of 165 people who helped their hospital clients in just 1 year recruit and hire over 6,000 permanent nurses and over 1,300 farm techs. Darren also worked at IBM Connexa for 16 years, leading outcomes-based recruitment programs, both small and large. He had over 460 direct reports in 27 different countries and managed programs that delivered over 35,000 hires in 2014. Very impressive, Darren. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Jeff. Thanks. It makes me a little tired just thinking about all that global travel and all those individuals working for me, but they were a fantastic team. So glad to be here today.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about engagement. And you can go right into the next slide. I think it really begins with defining it. And there are many definitions out there. I think in this definition, we say that employee engagement is the extent to which employees are motivated to contribute to organizational success and are willing to apply discretionary effort to accomplishing tasks important to the achievement of organizational goals. I think the key language here is really around willingness to apply discretionary effort. I think a lot of us are here to understand what is that secret sauce to create an environment where employees are inclined to apply that extra effort. But that engageability begins a lot sooner than the first day of employment, and that will be central to our presentation today. So why does engagement matter? Next slide, please. I want to share a couple of facts that I think are really interesting about engagement from a recent PwC study. Companies with highly engaged employees enjoy 33% higher profits, 51% lower turnover with satisfied employees, which I think really speaks to lowering regrettable turnover, an increase in performance-related business outcomes by 2.5 times, and 27% lower rate of absenteeism. So these are some really compelling numbers, and I think all of you understand why engagement is important because you're here today, but these are certainly some very interesting stats that support the importance of engagement today. Next slide, please, Darren. Engagement has a direct impact on business performance, and that's been proven over and over, whether it's turnover, customer service, quality, or safety. There's a direct impact. And to go a step further, a positive or negative impact on all of these metrics in turn affects the business's bottom line. So if you think about customer service, for instance, because I know that we probably can all recall a positive or negative experience in our own personal lives, a disengaged employee today can be incredibly harmful to business, especially when we live in a time when it's so easy for customers to socialize their experience via social media. So in summary, engagement impacts all aspects of the organization's performance. Next slide, Darren. So I know that many of you attending today's webcast are here to understand how you can influence employee engagement, you and your teams. And Darren, I think the key lies in understanding what employees really want. And at Engage2Excel, we have over 30 years of research data from our collaboration with Dr. Jack Wiley that shows exactly what employees want. Hopefully some of you were able to attend our last webcast on September 28th, in which Jack took attendees through the RESPECT paradigm. RESPECT is an acronym that stands for what employees most want from their employer, and that is the following: recognition, exciting work, security, pay, which really speaks to fair pay, education and career growth, conditions, both positive and social, and truth, mainly from senior leadership. Not surprisingly, 25% say fair pay, but after that comes recognition at 20%. So start recognizing candidates early and often. Recognize candidates for the recruitment steps that they perform well. Some examples include timely follow-up, providing good examples during the interview process, and exhibiting other positive behaviors. The bottom line is that people want to feel appreciated. About the RESPECT framework, we can go through all of these and give you tips. And the good news is that we're going to provide everyone attending today's session with a tip sheet that aligns back to this paradigm, giving you tips for how to engage candidates before they become employees so that you can give them exactly what they want before coming in the door. And with that, Darren, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And I just want to, again, reiterate our appreciation for everyone joining the call today. And really want to hope we can provide some valuable information for you and some great takeaways. So why should engagement be added to your talent acquisition strategy? You know, Jeff has kind of either introduced or reintroduced to you employee engagement and the kind of results organizations can achieve when they develop a highly engaged workforce. And we can deliver early on what those employees want. Every organization represented on this call today is at a different point in the talent acquisition maturity model, right? So some of you are smaller organizations and are very traditional. Maybe you're still even siloed away from HR or as part of HR. Or you may be in a developing organization where your HR counterparts engage with hiring managers to maybe a strong foundation that has already been laid. And you've got strong collaboration with marketing, with public relations, with your communications team. Or you may be mature enough to where you're a fully strategic organization, where you're a trusted advisor to the C-suite. And you really, as you think about where to include engagement in your talent acquisition process, you have to evaluate kind of where to begin. So while you're evaluating where your organization is in its maturity model and its journey to become a workplace that's really a magnet for talent. There are really three distinct realities that are changing our workforce dynamics that will provide some clarity for you and really a sense of urgency around adding engagement strategies to your talent acquisition strategy overall. And I want to spend just a little bit of time discussing these. First, we'll discuss the new demographic realities that are in the workplace today, and a lot of that has to do with millennials and their activity and their participation in the workforce. Along with that, we want to kind of do a deep dive into some misunderstood perceptions between millennials and HR and how that creates some friction and maybe even sometimes some confusion. And then the new dynamic of leadership gaps today and how those are coming along very quickly. So I wanted to cover each of those up front with you to kind of set the baseline for what we want to talk about. So, there's new labor market realities, and they really are changing the rules of engagement. So more than any time since World War II have we experienced such a shift in the labor market. And so what we're seeing today with 3.6 million baby boomers set to retire and a quarter of millennials currently taking on management roles. So it really impacts what's going on in the marketplace. And it's not just demographics that are being impacted, but it's also new and different motivators for each of these workforce segments. Unique technology adoption for each, and really distinct technology usage preferences for each. With millennials, they're sometimes known as the collaboration generation. They're really now impacting how we in leadership and in HR provide and leverage collaboration practices in the workplace. Everything from how the workplace is designed, literally with furniture and collaboration spaces, to how we communicate. And then right behind the millennials, you've got the Gen Zers coming up, and they're sometimes known as the jaded generation. I don't know if I totally agree with that term, but the jaded generation, you got to remember, they have come up through healthcare reform. They've come up through and grown into their roles through the recession of the late 2000s and mounting student loan debt. They're a real driving force behind retention and engagement for them. Those things are. And they're very focused on financial rewards and career advancement and recognition and work-life balances. So both of these unique demographics are really colliding in the workplace. And at the same time, we're seeing significant change in the nature of work. In a McKinsey & Company report that was just released earlier this week, it really focused on the rise of the independent worker, and where individuals are actually choosing to work in different arrangements. Focused on a lot of other ways that people get into independent work, but I want to talk a little bit about the ones that choose that different work arrangement. We now have between 20 and 30% of our workforce in roles that are defined as independent. This is between the U.S. and Europe. And it's really a staggering number when you look at it. It's close to 162 million workers that consider themselves to be independent workers. Interestingly, as this change occurs in the workforce dynamics and the nature of work itself, it's not just the millennials. They only actually represent 25% of those independent workers. It really includes all demographics across all job families, as well as all the market segments from a labor standpoint. When you compound this, and even enabling some of this change, is this rapid proliferation of the digital platforms. These platforms and apps are transforming independent work, building on and taking advantage of access to our mobile devices that we have today. And amazingly, when you think about the apps, and think about the Uber kind of apps that are out there that enable this independent workforce. The independent workforce that's out there today, only about 15% of that are using technology. But we've seen that 15% rise very, very quickly over the last several years. I think we've only begun to see some of the impact that the independent worker and this platform usage is going to take. At the same time, you think about this independent workforce, right? It provides some challenges for us. How do we communicate? How do we engage them? How do we provide benefits for them? And how do we access and give them access to our internal systems? But at the same time, when we have those challenges, there's also a significant benefit to the overall economy. It helps cushion some unemployment. It's improving labor force participation rates that are at a 30, 40-year low right now. It also stimulates demand, and it raises workforce productivity. And as we continue to see decreasing labor participation rates, and in many cases full employment, there is significant competition for those most qualified candidates with the skills and the behaviors that drive top performance. This competition will only continue to increase as these realities take hold and begin to completely change the landscape of the labor market. And lastly, and importantly, other changes are shifting in the workforce diversity. The diversity in the labor force is projected to increase overall. While white, non-Hispanics continue to decrease, they'll become less than 60% of the civilian workforce in 2024, and today it's right around 65%. So a lot of things are changing in the labor market. And so I have to admit that I'm a little bit of a labor market data junkie, and as we were preparing for the webinar today, my team said, you need to cut back on some of your statistics that you've done research on, but I do love the interesting and complexity around the labor force data that's out there. I'm just completely intrigued by the simple premise of supply and demand and how labor market supply and that demand impacts so many things, from career choices to wages to the way educational institutions design their curriculum and where we have to go geographically to find the talent that we need. When you add on top of that the behavioral science with the gap in emotional intelligence that's out there that millennials openly admit that they struggle with, I just think it's exciting and really encouraging as leaders as we can help develop and implement new strategies to provide creative solutions. So the balance is shifting actually quite quickly now. And if you've not experienced already, and most of you I'm sure already have, you will. Over the next 3 years, we're going to see a significant balance shift between the boomers in a place of dominance in the labor market to where the millennials take over. And I wish at this point I really had a very cool video of an avalanche. And you've seen them on TV and on YouTube where they start out slow and just a large section of snow just kind of cracks on the side of a mountain. And it seems to just disconnect and move kind of slowly at first. Then we begin to see just how this massive amount of snow really is. This represents, millennials. Then it begins to slide down the side of the mountain as one gigantic piece. And we can see it moving. It's kind of moving in slow motion at first. And this has kind of been the last several years with the millennials moving in slow motion into these more dominant roles in the workforce. Then we begin to see this avalanche as it quickly picks up speed and how it begins to fold under itself and roll and create a cloud of debris and powder and turmoil. This is us, right, in the workforce and leadership roles, trying to figure out how we're going to deal with it and in front of it. Well, this demographic shift is what we're going to all experience. And so when you think about that avalanche, does it make you afraid? Well, there's more. Just think about it. The millennials are going to represent 74% of the workforce by 2025, and that's less than 10 years away. We also see significant shifts in how the boomers and the Gen Zers are going to participate in the workforce. You can see the graph here. With more boomers staying on longer, they're going to increase the amount of participation in the workforce, and Gen Zers are actually jumping into the workforce, but they're opting for continued education opportunities, and so their participation rate is a little bit less. Are you worried yet? Okay, don't be afraid, all right? It's just great challenges for us. Just be informed and be prepared, and that's probably why you're on the call today, right? So as we think about the shift with millennials, let's think about the differences in perception between millennials and HR professionals. And Jeff, I think we may have a poll question here to send out to everyone. Is that right?
We sure do. Yep. And this is something that we'd like everyone to participate in. Where is the greatest gap between how millennials describe themselves and how HR professionals describe millennials? First is fun-loving. Second is tech-savvy. Third is loyal to their employer. And the last is hardworking. We'll give folks a minute to respond, but we thought it would be very interesting to see the audience's perception versus the data that we've prepared for you today. Looks like we're at about 50% voted, Darren. We'll try to get a little bit more. And we're at about 71%. We'll give it a few more seconds. All right, let's close and share the results. So it looks like, Darren, the loyal to their employer, 44%, that's the largest segment. Second largest would be tech savvy, third hardworking, and 3% said fun loving. Let me hide
awesome.
that one. Yeah, interesting results.
Yep, that's great. So we have got an exceptionally wise group on the phone today. So let's take a look at the results. And so when you think about the perception gap and how millennials would describe themselves, you can be, and really once you understand this, you can start crafting strategic approaches to maximizing engagement with millennials and the other significant workforce segments that we want to understand. So take a look at this graph on the left. We see the millennials, right? And 65% see themselves as people savvy. They're somewhat tech savvy, only 35%, which kind of surprised me a little bit. They view themselves as very loyal to their employer. Look at that. 82% believe that they are loyal to their employer. Only 14% consider themselves to be fun-loving, which is a whole another deep dive for another webinar, right? And 86% describe themselves as hardworking. So when you take a look at kind of how our group on the phone today rated, how the millennials describe themselves, let's compare that to perceptions of HR professionals in the same survey, okay? So you can see it's interesting. So most HR professionals would describe the millennials as not that people savvy, and I think we concurred with some of that. I think you'll see that tech savvy, we think they're way more tech savvy in HR than they do themselves, but there is some pretty big disconnect. And although in our poll we had 44% said they were loyal to their employer, which is much greater than what was shown here, the HR professionals in this survey from Beyond.com said that 1% were loyal to the employer. So stark contrast in responses, and really centered around loyalty to the employer. Where 82% of those millennials would describe themselves as loyal, I think we know that there's this definition and maybe even a perception issue here, right? While millennials may perceive themselves as being very loyal to employers, our reality is just somewhat different. And according to the U.S. Labor Bureau statistics, the median tenure for workers that are between 25 and 34 is only 3 years. With boomers, when they think about that, it's almost 9 years. So this is just an opportunity for us to reframe for ourselves our perceptions and how the nature of work is going to continue to morph. And there's one more thing we want to talk about here is also the leadership gap, right? So let's talk about bridging that gap. As millennials continue to move into leadership roles, you're going to have to balance how you develop your next generation of leaders. There's a reason why 63% of chief executives feel that only 1 in 3 of their best managers are going to leave their organization before joining top leadership. You hear sometimes people refer to it as the brain drain, right? So when you think about this issue that's coming up, there's got to be some targeted and specific strategy in place that will focus on bridging that gap. And as you get more and more millennials into that leadership role, you have to have a strategic sourcing and selection plan that will enable you to select millennials with leadership potential, competencies, and emotional intelligence. They're going to have to navigate a very complex labor landscape that's going to require them to have the skills and really engage boomers with experience and preferences and communication style that may be different from their own. At the same time, there's this need, really, we're going to have also to engage and retain the boomers as long as possible. So we need to prepare them to be led and be managed by millennials. So hiring for engageability is going to be critical for the leaders of the future. And I think I want to just pause here. I'm not sure if we have any questions yet, but after we kind of talk about these 3 major things in the marketplace that are happening, I want to see if there's any questions at this point. So Tyler, I'll ask you, are there any questions posted out there? If not, we'll move on.
Hi, Darren. There is one question on the slide. Is being loyal to the employer the same as being loyal to your direct supervisor boss?
That's a great question. When we think about why people leave the roles that they're in, many times it goes right back to their boss and their manager and their leader in the organization. So I think that loyalty is congruent, that if you're loyal to your boss and your leader, you do that for a reason, because they have great leadership skills and because they are very transparent in their communication, because they provide a vision for you. Now, certainly there can be disconnects up and down the chain of command in the organization, and how the senior leaders in the organization really define the vision and define the values and live out those values could create a disconnect between those employees and their loyalty to the organization. So it's a little bit of both, but if you've got a great connection between the senior leaders and your direct leader or your direct manager, I would say yes, it's the same. But if there's a disconnect, then you're going to go with your manager and your leader that you directly report to from a loyalty standpoint. And many times you see individuals follow those managers when they move from one organization to the next. It's a great question, by the way. So as we move into thinking more about talent and engagement, Brian Tracy, best-selling author, has said that, when you're recognized and praised for an accomplishment by someone whose opinion you hold high, your self-esteem goes up, along with your eagerness and enthusiasm to do an even better job. And we know from Jack's research that recognition is the second most important attribute after pay that drives engagement. So when you think about feelings of enthusiasm about your employment brand and your organization and the roles that you're really needing in your organization, it's critical that you engage your candidates throughout the entire process. An engaged candidate is an enthused candidate and an advocate for your organization, and then really becomes an enthused new hire. And then throughout the onboarding process, they're going to become an engaged and productive employee. It's also critical that when you think about the pre-hire experience, that you have an engagement strategy, right? I'm not spending a lot of time today discussing the intricacies of employment branding, but we know that your employment brand is usually the first impression that potential talent will get of your organization. Long term, your employment brand really is validated through this authentic realization of your leadership team, especially your senior leadership team, ability to deliver on your unique brand values. They live true to that. Being true to that brand and your employee value proposition is critical through the recruitment process year over year. Those organizations that don't have an authentic brand are going to be increasingly called out on social media and will develop a reputation in the local labor market as well. What we're beginning to see more and more of is that millennials and the Gen Zers are willing and, quite honestly, aggressively active in posting their experiences via Glassdoor, Facebook, LinkedIn. According to SourceCon, when it comes to the candidate experience, 82% of candidates will share their experience with their inner circle. 51% of candidates today will share their experience on social media. That's half. Half your candidates are going to share whatever experience they had out on social media. And when you think about how job seekers look for new roles today and begin to investigate and think about other companies they're looking for, about 48% of job seekers are going to check out your organization and your CEO ratings on Glassdoor. So it's really critical to have an authentic brand. I just reminded recently, one of our colleagues' daughter was applying for jobs in New York, and she had interviewed with several ad agencies. She was fortunate. She had gotten several offers. But of those offers, she turned down 2. And when her dad was asking her about that, why did you turn down those offers? She said, well, I saw online where in social media the experiences of other candidates that had and recently hired staff had was not positive. And there goes that top talent slipping right through their fingers. So having an engagement strategy throughout your hiring and onboarding process, I think, is just really critical for you securing top talent. So we get to a point where you can use engagement strategies as part of your overall competitive advantage. And to really enhance your selection science, you have to have a confident, authentic, and realistic grasp of how your organization executes against a strategy. Kind of walking the walk and talking the talk, so to speak. So the first step is to research and evaluate your unique engagement culture within your organization. Understanding your real engagement culture through distilling your engagement survey data, how you respond to that, the action that you take on your survey data, how you communicate that, your performance management processes, your unique goal-setting culture, and is it once a year, is it quarterly, weekly, monthly? How do you really set goals and follow up on those goals? And your real recognition culture. And when you look at all of those things, it's really going to reveal both the rational facts about your organization and these emotional truths, which really comes in to be your authentic employee value proposition. And secondly, you need to evaluate your top performers. Most importantly, those who deliver on both the company's performance metrics and those who deliver on and live out your mission and your vision and your values in a very engaging way. And usually these are your leaders and your top performers who are engaged. They're the ones that are creating high-performing business units. So you want to seek them out and understand really who they are. And we know that companies with highly engaged employees earn 13% greater shareholder returns over a 5-year period. Next, once you understand both the organizational engagement culture, and remember, this is not your engagement score, right, but the culture and behavior of top performers, you can actually determine the gaps and design a process to select and utilize the attributes where the greatest opportunities for improvement are. And Jeff, I think we have another poll question here. Is that right?
Yes, we do. Let me launch that for you, Darren. And the question is, after what period of time do new employees who do not feel valued decide to stay or leave an employer for another organization? Option A is first week. The second is first 2 months. The third is first 6 months. And the last option is first year. So we'll give just a moment for everyone to respond. And people are responding very quickly, Darren. We're already at about 54%. And we're about 67%, so we'll give just another 10 seconds or so. All right, so I'm going to close the poll. Let's show the results. So it looks like, Darren, well, this audience is very good. First 2 months had the highest number of responses at 40%. Second was first 6 months at 29%. Then first year at 20%, and then 10% said the first week.
That's great. Well, that's spot on, the research that we have as well. So generally, we find that within the first 2 months, employees will make a decision on whether they're going to stay or where they're going to go. So it's really critical then not only to have this engageability built into your recruiting process, but also once they're on board in that early part of their tenure with you. So post-hire success depends on really how quickly you can begin to demonstrate to your new hires just how valuable they are. Just a simple metric like your cost per hire can frame up that organizational cost impact for you. We all know that the hard and soft dollar cost of turnover and turnover replacement is estimated to be, again, depending on the job family, somewhere between 25% to sometimes as high as 200% of that employee's annual salary, depending on their role. So, what is the value of the post-hire engagement returns? And so when we know that 50% of employees who don't feel valued, and that's going to occur really, like we said, in the first 2 months, half of the employees who don't feel valued plan on actively seeking employment in the next year. 50%. It's a huge number. And how depressing is it really to not feel valued? That's just a miserable place to be, right? If you've ever been there before, it's not fun. And so you can understand that if they don't feel valued, they're going to be very active in looking for something else. And just add another metric to the conversation. When you have engaged employees, you also have 27% less absenteeism. They're valued, they're engaged, they actually show up and perform. So back to the ones that don't feel valued for a second. Even if they don't become active job seekers within that first year, they certainly become vulnerable to being poached, recruited, and stolen by your competition. And in my mind, and maybe even just as bad or maybe even worse, they become actively disengaged. You have an actively disengaged employee. They begin to act passive-aggressively, and they begin to sabotage your organizational goals just through inactivity. So we've discussed labor market shifts and their impact on engagement can have on your new hires. So it's critical that you begin hiring for engageability. Hiring for engageability means that you're having an engagement-enabled talent acquisition process. Your organization will get 3 significant benefits from this approach. So far, we discussed, first of all, you're going to attract and you're going to cultivate and retain better quality candidates. Your organization will begin to attract and become a magnet to those candidates who are drawn to your culture with a mutual match of shared values. And then importantly, you're going to realize greater productivity and lower turnover for those highly engaged employees. So I just want to stop here before we get into some tactical pieces of what we're going to do and see if there are any other questions, Tyler, out there that we might be able to answer. If not, we'll move on.
Sure, Darren. There is a couple questions that are really asking the same thing, and it's really all about a lot of great information that's been shared so far. How do we educate or convey a lot of these trends with our senior leaders to help introduce this to them?
Yeah, good question. And I kind of think back around, what we need to do to show ROI and show, the impact on the organization. It kind of goes back to data. So as you begin to have your conversations with your senior leadership, go back to that data slide and go toward the very beginning that talks about the 2 times more productivity and the lower turnover around engaged employees and the impact that you can have on your overall metrics in your organization when you've got a engaged workforce. Good question. Thank you. So, you think about your pipeline, right? How can you infuse engageability into your hiring process? In this last section, I just want to provide some insight on how we believe you can build a proactive pipeline and a selection process that's going to yield highly engaged candidates. So pipelining, let's just define it real quick. When I think about candidate pipelining, it really is this continuous and systematic building of relationships with a pool of qualified and potential candidates, including just your current employees, your alumni, with the goal, and your alumni, with the goal of identifying and creating these mutual opportunities. So think back over the last 16 years, and think about this technology ecosystem pendulum that we have seen, as it has swung back and forth. Applicant tracking systems, as we know them today, really started out as candidate tracking systems, and then into requisition management systems. And now we're fully entering candidate relationship management phase of their evolution. In the last 16 years, applicant tracking systems, with the desire to communicate with legacy HRS programs, were designed and really pushed us into this reactive response mode. Rec created, rec approved, start recruiting, is it filled yet? And so that's the cycle we went through for a long time. We realized that this is just not working. And we began to creatively use the systems that we had. So we would open pipeline recs. And now we've begun to add on CRM tools as a way to automate as much as possible. It makes me tired just thinking about it sometimes, all the changes we've gone through the last several years. But as you can see, there are many benefits to creating an engagement-enabled pipeline that you can use for your talent. And I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I just think it's important to note that some of these benefits are really benefits that you create early on, and they're fairly easy to hit once you get a process in place. Other roles, especially like creating a state of talent readiness, it requires an organization-wide strategy and coordination between succession planning, workforce planning, current and future labor market dynamics, and your pipelining strategy. So moving from the concept of talent pipelining into your recruitment process, we'll talk about this just for a second. So in Deloitte's 2015 Global Human Capital Trends Survey, they indicated that the balance of power and the employer-employee relationship has shifted, making today's employees more like customers or partners than subordinates. My team always gives me a hard time because I tell them stories about programs from the past and how they've impacted our approach today. I'd say it's my way of cascading and transferring our culture, but it's not bad, right? But one of these phrases or stories that they always give me a hard time about that they can now actually repeat back to me is back in the Sprint days story. So very early on in my recruiting career, I was responsible for a large-scale program that I managed, hiring for Sprint in their early days of their organization. This is back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. We helped them hire over 8,000 activation and customer service reps. This was our way to go in and do massive candidate generation. It really was focused on driving the number of candidates that we needed so we could then focus on the majority of our time in our selection science and driving quality of hire. With this extremely high volume of candidates we generated, we also knew we had to focus on their experience. We began to focus on candidate care. At the time, only 1 in 30 were going to get hired. We knew that the vast majority, of 29 of everyone that we hired, would not become employees. we could certainly be sure that those were potential customers for Sprint PCS. Hence, candidate care was as important as our ability to deliver quality of hire. So with this in mind, I just think we need to kind of elevate our approach and use customer engagement strategies to relate to candidates more like prospective customers. So the trend of employment as an experience is here to stay, and candidates, employees alike are looking at their employment as an experience. One that reframes the employment experience from this work-life balance that we've talked about in our generational work to really a work-life blend. And when you think about if it's not positive or aligned to their lifestyle, they're not benefiting from it, then they're going to make that change or discontinue it. The McKinsey study that I referenced earlier also noted that between 60 and 80% of those that chose independent work, they did so because of lifestyle. Well, so I didn't say work style, but I said lifestyle, right? So what I want to do is cover some specific recommendations for each of these 6 steps in the recruitment process that you can use to build an engagement strategy into each stage of the recruiting process. Now, those 6 that we were just looking at, and I'll go back real quick so you can see them, okay? These may not be your exact processes and steps, right? But I think you're able to apply these tactics and recommendations into the appropriate step that works best in your process, okay? So let's go through these. Branding and differentiation. Differentiation is tough, but it's where I think there's a lot of opportunity. Creating an employment brand, okay, that communicates and demonstrates your values is important. But based on our research, you need to align and communicate those mission, vision, and values to the attributes that are identified in some of Jack's Respect research. So you want to communicate them in a way that addresses the things that employees really want. In order to effectively communicate that message and to resonate with potential employees, they have to be clearly reflected in your employment brand. Using real-life examples and employee testimonials are key to delivering this message in an authentic way. So what's it really like to work here, and what will they experience? As you begin to frame your brand and your employee value proposition, you also want to take into consideration your local market. Who are your competitors, both within your industry and on the outside of your industry, and by a job family that creates this competition for the talent that you need to really be competitive. So just to continue on the branding and differentiation just for a minute, I want to make sure that you have the right resources for executing on an engaging talent acquisition strategy. And I said I wasn't going to do a deep dive in employment branding, but here we are talking about it again, right? It just feels like I'm talking about it a little bit more, but I just want to make sure that this is one piece of your engagement strategy that really has a far-reaching impact. Once you've defined your employment brand and what makes your organization, you want to make sure that you have the right resources for executing on that engaging talent acquisition strategy. You may find that you have to reallocate some of your sourcing budget to a more strategic priorities to make sure that you're aligned with other HR priorities. And secondly, you want to make sure that you segment your message to your target audience. There are broad messages that you want to communicate, and there are specific targeted messages that you want to send the most critical talent groups. I remember once we were recruiting for pharmacy technicians, and we had spent a significant amount of our budget doing job fairs and radio and TV to support those events. We were having limited success, and what we decided to do is go through a market segmentation exercise and study and really understand the demographics, the sociographics, and the psychographics of the high-performing groups of pharmacy technicians that we're going to have to pipeline and eventually hire. It was really interesting data, and we found that all the top performers fell into job categories in 5 distinct market segments. PRISM segments, you might have heard of the PRISM segments, right? Well, one unique trait of all those behaviors, all 5 segments, actually there were 2. One, they ate at Taco Bell at least once a month, and number 2, they enjoyed going bowling once a month. We laughed about that. We said, seriously, this can't be the 2 things they have in common. And apart from going to Taco Bell and buying gift cards or recruiting from Taco Bell, we decided to think about different ways to meet them in their lifestyle. Understanding where they spent their money and their free time allowed us to create a strategy that included bowling events, where we sent special invitations out. We created an opportunity for hiring managers to come in and be involved and become ambassadors for both the brand, the role, and the culture. Save that organization about $150,000 a quarter in advertising spend. And so that approach also enables us to create employee ambassadors out of hiring managers. They know what it's like better than anyone else in your organization to really what it's like to work there. Enlist them, partner with them, enable them, And then you know what? Recognize them for their contributions. Give them kudos for those things that they're doing when they help out. In your marketing department, they should really be your next best friend. As important as having a cohesive message is, they can help you create and deliver compelling and also relevant content. So when you're finished today, go make someone in marketing your friends. They will absolutely help you out. So moving on to sourcing. And so when you think about sourcing, your engagement strategies will help you do a better job matching candidates. And that's what's critical to have an efficient process, but also an engaging process. So once you've identified the attributes of those highest performing, you understand what top performers really look like. This will tell you where your candidates are and what they're doing. You want to optimize your job post using industry-specific keywords and lifestyle words for efficient matching. Not listed here, but really critical in some sourcing is using the way you use social media. Whether you're using newer tools like SourceHub or like tools like Profit that will really help recruiters by automating your search streams. Also utilize other social media search tools that are embedded into Facebook and LinkedIn and Glassdoor. But using lifestyle searches will help you begin to create a pool that matches your mission, your culture, and the roles and the unique roles that you need to fill. And last but not least, but because we live in a world that focuses on efficiency and process and, hey, what's your time to fill, prioritize those candidates based on the ones that are the most closely matched to your top performers and have demonstrated interest in your company. Get to them, engage them, and get them to offer quickly. Let's talk about a second about attracting candidates, okay? To take the idea and the concept that you said segment your candidate engagement strategies similar to how marketing segments customer engagement strategies, you must improve the candidate experience. Think about the candidate experience in the same way your potential customers are motivated to purchase. You have to move from candidate touch points, steps and statuses, to this candidate journey. And candidate journeys are like customer journeys. They consist of a progression of these touch points that add together, and you put them all together, they become an experience that candidates get when they interact with your company. So see the world as candidates do. It will help you better organize and mobilize your strategy and recruitment team around these candidate needs. Yep, candidate needs, right? And I finally tell you another conversation I had just yesterday with a former colleague of mine who was in the interview process for a senior director role in a fairly large organization. He was very frustrated because, first of all, the length of time that it had taken to get initial contact in the first interview. And then they've rescheduled the interview for next week several times. They added several hours between the interviews to accommodate internal groups. So they were very accommodating for their own groups, but not accommodating the candidates at all. Now, I'm still old school as a boomer, right? I would say just do what you have to do to get into the role that you want. I'll tell you, I could just tell that his frustration reached a point where he was losing interest in the role and the organization quickly based on this experience. Anyway, I don't want to digress too further into that. So redesigning this candidate experience, reshaping interactions into different sequences. And through the effort, although the effort may start small, it would also entail digitizing your processes, reorienting your company culture, but really beginning to define new approaches to your process. So rewiring your organization to provide a leading candidate experience is really a journey itself. It often takes several years and requiring support and sponsorship from the organization's leadership and frontline recruiters alike. So with that in mind, I just want to do about 3 different levels of engagement tactics that will accompany your candidate engagement strategy. First, those that are interested. Start that with branding, low-level engagement, many times one way, contact via newsletter, social media updates, and information push. Next in the journey, you'll cultivate these hot leads. All right, these tactics progress, and it's really more content management-driven strategy. This is a medium level of engagement where you now have some devoted potential candidates. At this level, more social media is utilized for communication back and forth, and now becomes a 2-way communication instead of 1-way. Maybe they follow your company or they like your post, and this is where you see they start to align with your uniquely branded messaging and your values. Lastly, there are applicants, not in the formal sense, but applicants are your star candidates, your alumni, right? Your top talent, those who are currently at your competitors that you want to convert to help you achieve your strategic goals. These require a high level of relationship management. And once you have a one-on-one with these candidates, you can start to leverage everything we just mentioned from social media and face-to-face, and you and your employment ambassadors and your recruiters are going to have to really build this relationship with these candidates. So the next step is applying. And so when you think about building engagement into your application process, it can take really many forms, and hopefully not many forms, but I'm bunch, right? That was supposed to be a joke, right? Think many forms, but don't have many forms, right? Anyway, there's several ideas I want you just to think about here. And you want to, again, start thinking about treating candidates as customers. So how do you build engagement into the application process? At the end of the day, recruiting is still selling, and selling is about fulfilling a need. So apart from making hiring decisions around past performance and around engagement, which we'll get to here in just a second, I want to discuss for a few minutes and highlight some consumer and candidate engagement tactics that you can infuse in your candidate attraction strategy. These will enable you to develop a highly engaged candidate pool that you can select from. First, and most importantly, is developing that emotional connection. Introducing yourself is more than just a name and a title and the company who you're with. It's about finding and creating commonalities with those candidates, whether it's around geography, role types, or more importantly, common values and emotions. Using real team member images and names on your website and emails, this is going to begin to create this commonality and this authentic relationship with the candidates. Secondly, maximize your talent communities and forums. These communities and forums provide you with a real opportunity to engage directly with candidates. Make sure you're utilizing your brand ambassadors and your hiring leaders and your own industry subject matter experts. They can deliver relevant topics and begin to bring candidates into the organization by enabling their active participation on the communities and forums. Thirdly, think about ways to share exclusive content and offers with your most valued candidates. It begins to build a relationship with the candidates. You can share exclusive content or offers or invitation-only events. And, I think about my wife. She always gets things from Kohl's and Macy's, and they do a great job of creating what feels like for her this unique opportunity to save money and go to the store. And there's special events like fashion shows that they provide that she's interested in. So she'll go and enjoy that content. In a broad sense, you can do this through something as simple as an interview day and doing special invitation days to come on site. Your goal really is to enable candidates to become aligned to your mission and your vision and values in a way that they become part of your team in advance. They can even become advocates and referral sources for you. So whether it's part of a new product launch, a location grand opening, company anniversaries, get them involved. If you know anything about Nashville, one of our most famous bar and music venues is Tootsie's Orchid Lounge. It's a little bitty hole-in-the-wall kind of place. But they're celebrating their 60th anniversary this week. And unfortunately, I won't be able to attend it because I'm traveling, but I really like their atmosphere. The quality of musicians they bring is very, very good, and you just never know who's going to show up on any given night and play with the band. So I've recommended this celebration event that they're having down on Broadway in Nashville to a bunch of friends of mine who are visiting there this week. All of a sudden, I just realized I'm an unofficial brand ambassador for Tootsie's. I'm not sure what that says about me, but I'm aligned to what they do. Next, you want to think about creating this connection. Create that opportunity with candidates so they can see what a day in their life looks like. We've even hosted events like a pre-hire meet and greet by invitation, where new hires get to come in advance of their start date, get a tour, meet the senior leaders, meet trainers and peers that are starting at the same time that they do. And we scale this in such a way that families could also attend. Again, the families also become brand ambassadors because they realize how fantastic the organization is. And then last but not least, I think about what we've done some today, some polling in your communities, on your website, or even contests or a short-term intern program really will help you continue to work through and build those relationships. I'm going to run through this a little bit just in essence of time because I've got several more things I want to cover. But when I think about this critical next step, it really is about these high engageables. And we want to be able to identify candidates who really align with your company's unique culture of engagement, have the attributes that drive employee engagement, and who exhibited behaviors that are valued by employees. So one of the things that Jeff mentioned early on that we'll send out today are really tips around how you can use each one of these things that we know that employees want: recognition, exciting work, security, and pay, and some tips that you can use throughout the entire interview process that helps you discuss and engage with candidates in a way that they feel valued and recognized in the organization. And that takes it on to hiring and onboarding. So as you get to the last stage of the recruiting process, I think we have one more polling question, Jeff. Is that right?
Yes, we do have one more polling question, and just in the essence of time, we're going to go through this rather quickly. So let's just get this one launched. All right, and the question is, does your current employee onboarding program recognize achievements and milestones for new employees over the first year? There's no right answer for this, but we're just interested, yes, no, or not sure. Those are the options. And we're already about half. And we'll give about 10 more seconds. All right, and Darren, looks like there may be some opportunity here. Let me show the results. So 58% said no. We had 25% that said yes. So congratulations. There's about a fourth of you that are embedding this recognition into the onboarding process, and 17% said not sure.
Great. It's really interesting. So engaging new hires through this comprehensive onboarding program really is critical to retention. You know, again, research shows that new hires make an emotional connection and sometimes a rational decision whether or not to stay as early as the first 2 months. Remember the earlier poll that we did? So many white papers and press releases out there today from applicant tracking providers talk about the value of onboarding and automating your onboarding. But we believe this is critical, that the strong foundation is not just through doing I-9s and new hire paperwork, but it's about creating a strong foundation for your new hires that enables them to reach, 100% of productivity really as soon as possible. And so the new hires that you have in that first 2 months, right, they're at significant risk of leaving the organization or deciding to leave the organization until they get to 100% productivity, which really means they've got the knowledge, the tools, and expertise to provide value back to the organization. So you want to make sure you protect your investment in a recruiting program an onboarding program that is tailored to your organization. So different roles take different amount of time to become productive, and most traditional onboarding programs last only 1 to 2 weeks. But in many cases, onboarding and training lasts well into their first year, so we have lots of opportunity during their early tenure to protect that investment. So think about high engagement onboarding. It's not only just building a foundation, but it's building a connection. Keeping new employees engaged and motivated from the start is critical. An onboarding program that allows an organization to recognize those achievements and milestones creates connections and engages employees from the new start. And several benefits that you're going to get is that new employees will see that they're valued as part of the organization. They're going to gain confidence. They're going to build relationships. They're beginning to adapt and adopt a culture of recognition, and they'll continue to pursue knowledge and embrace success. So I wanted to wrap up so we have a few more minutes for questions if we need to, but I just want to say that was a lot for an hour, and I know I've got a southern accent and I talk really fast, so I just really appreciate your time and attention, and I wanted to close just by outlining just a few key takeaways from our discussion today, and then we'll have a few questions. So Jeff reminded us about the definition of engagement and its correlation to discretionary effort. There's a ton of benefits from lower turnover to higher productivity to increased shareholder return. We know that the work that Dr. Jack Wiley has done over the last 30 years, that engagement levels are influenced by what employees really want, which is respect, all the things that go with that. We went through the significant challenges and new labor market realities and millennials and bringing them into the workforce and into leadership roles. We discussed how leaders and recruiters can uniquely deliver what employees really want, and remember that tip sheet is to follow, and went through each phase of the talent acquisition process very quickly, I might add, to discuss specific tactics and to build an engaging process and how you can hire for engageability. And lastly, we discussed specific high-performance onboarding, which can have lasting impact to the retention of your key talent. So with that, I think we have a minute or two, if that, for a few more questions, if any are left. Before that, I just want to say thank you again and really appreciate your time and hope you're able to take away just a few things that might help you hire for engageability as a way to continue to drive engagement in your culture. Tyler, are there any other questions?
No new questions.
Okay. So Jeff, you want to wrap it up? Or?
Great. Again, thank you so much for everyone joining today. Darren, thank you so much for all of your insights. Again, we will be providing everyone that's attending with copies of the presentation, as well as the tip sheet that we referenced during the presentation. So, Sylvia, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our fine presenters from Engage2Excel today for presenting this very informative webinar. Just a reminder to the attendees who attended the live webcast, you'll receive an email from hr.com with your certification credit information within 1 to 2 business days. And if you're watching this from our archives, then your credit information will be placed in your account when you click on the button at the end of the presentation, Redeem Your Credit. We value your feedback, so please take a moment and fill out the final evaluation survey that will pop up on your screen once the webinar has concluded. And this is the end of the webinar today. Thanks again for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.